Did you know that perimenopause lasts on average 10 years for most women? And when you consider that women make up 50% of the population, this is a significant amount of time for a topic that gets largely ignored. So, why is that? And as women, what can we do to take more control of this piece of our life that has such a huge impact on our quality of life, even when no one's really talking about it? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today as we dive in with best-selling author and menopause expert Dr. Liz Lyster. There are so many golden nuggets and takeaways in this interview that you're probably going to want to take notes. So let's get started. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I'm the founder of Thinlicious and the creator of the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And today we're going to be chatting with Dr. Liz Lyster, who is an OBGYN medical doctor, a bestselling author and speaker, and an expert in perimenopause and menopause. And today she's shedding some serious light on a topic that is still, for the most part, largely ignored and misunderstood by the medical community: perimenopause, menopause, and hormonal replenishment therapy. It's definitely a must listen for any woman in your 40s or beyond. So without further ado, I am so excited to be able to introduce you to today's interview guest, Dr. Liz Lyster. Dr. Liz, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Ruth. Happy to be here with you.
Yay. So let's talk about menopause because it's a big thing. It is a big, big thing. And I think that before we do that, though, I need to just ask you about yourself. What I totally flaked out on my first question. Like, so excited to jump into this topic. Can't even wait. But first, tell us a little bit about your background, because I think that's actually really, really important. So tell us about who you are, what you do, how you got to be doing what you're doing now.
Absolutely. You bet. So first of all, I'm Dr. Liz Lyster, and I want to just help you out by saying that I went into menopause when I was 43, and I'm 59 now. So everything that we're going to talk about, all the questions you may ask, and everything that we go over, I have personally experienced, asked myself those questions, looked in addition to the research as well as my own experience. I am an OBGYN board certified. I stopped delivering babies a long time ago because I prefer to sleep at night. Then I kept narrowing my practice. So I stopped doing the major surgeries. I had my little kids. They're both in their 20s now. And I just kept narrowing things down. So it got to the point where I was only doing office gynecology. And then I had the opportunity to really become a specialist, an expert in the hormone balance piece. I had written my first book by that point in time, and I really loved it. And so that's where I've been now for coming up on, well, almost 20 years of the focus on the hormone piece, but really very narrowly looking at that. And I just love helping mostly women, men as well, really of all ages, but primarily women in their 40s and 50s, balance their hormones and feel great. I think it's our birthright to feel great, to feel sexy, and to really fulfill on our potential. So that's what I'm here for. It's my assignment.
I love that. So that's interesting. You started with hormones, really focusing in on hormones about 20 years ago. So that would have been before you actually experienced menopause. Did anything change for you once you started going through it yourself? Or was it like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen? Or did it like kind of throw you off a little bit?
Okay. Great question. It didn't throw me off too badly for a few important reasons. One is my family background is from Argentina. My mom's retired from being a doctor. my grandma, those women were incredible models for me of getting older and getting stronger and staying vibrant. So that was very important. The other is that I don't really know why, but I was always tuned in to learning about hormones specifically. That really has been a theme now that you make me think about it. I remember I was still delivering babies, and I was at a lecture and it was talking about certain hormones and animal studies and the development of breast cancer. And this is before the Women's Health Initiative. And I remember where I was when I heard that information. So I guess I've always had a particular draw to that kind of difference, that angle. And when I was in medical school, I followed the chief resident into an exam room because that's what you do when you're a student. You follow other people around a lot. And we went and there was this woman having a lot of menopausal symptoms. And honestly, Ruth, I don't remember exactly what we did for her. I don't remember if the doctor I was following wrote a prescription or not, but I do remember how much better the woman felt after we listened to her and talked with her. That
Wow.
left a huge impression on me. So I think that's
Like
probably
just being
connected.
heard.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So let's talk about that. Some of the emotional challenges that you see that for women that happen during kind of this time of life, right? Perimenopause, menopause, and what is the difference, do you think, between the physical and the emotional stuff?
Well, first of all, there's no separation. You know about this. You've talked about hormones as the chemistry of our emotions. That's how I refer to hormones. So there's really no separation. The whole phrase mind body, it's a little bit misleading, right? Because our mind is completely not separate from the body. It's very integrated. They are integrated. And so when we take that integrated approach, we do a lot better, we get a lot further. I think that there's a big connection and not a coincidence. I remember when I turned 40, I was not very happy about it leading up to it. And I didn't want to have a party. And then a friend of mine who was in her early 40s persuaded me. So I had a party. It was a lot of fun. And as soon as I turned 40, I was like, oh, hey, this feels good. This is good. You know, you come into your
Yeah.
own, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to like when you're in your 20s. I think a lot of people in their 20s and probably even 30s, thinking back for myself, is very externally motivated. What are people thinking? Like really
Yes.
focused on that. And when you enter your 40s, it's such a wonderful, fabulous opportunity. In 50s, it just gets better.
I
Just
That's what I
FYI.
hear. Like I think the 40s have been my best decade so far. Like I'm like, this is great. If 50 is even better than this, then bring it on. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have the biggest party ever.
that's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. When I turned 50, that's when I went and climbed Kilimanjaro. That was
That's
fun.
amazing.
It was really
Wow.
fun.
Wow.
It
That's
was
amazing.
super fun. Anybody listening who likes hiking, you can climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, you have to
Really?
prepare, you have to do
Yeah.
things to get ready, but it's not, my mother was very afraid that I was going to have ice picks and clamps on my shoes and stuff. She was like picturing, you know,
Everest.
yeah, she
Dead
was really
bodies along the
afraid.
right along
But
the way.
it's a long, beautiful hike. And so I set myself that challenge. Then I found out from one of my patients, she goes, oh, that's interesting. When I turned 50, I went to Italy and did a cooking class for a week. And I thought, huh, good. I never, that's
Oh
a pretty
gosh.
nice idea.
Getting all the ideas now. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are let's take it back to perimenopause, menopause. Like what
Yes.
are there different phases that you go through and how do you know which phase you're in?
Okay, great question. I like to answer this question going backwards. So, menopause is one whole year without your period, then you're in menopause. That's the more or less official definition. Average age is 51.
Okay.
Then there's years before that where everything's marching along, regular monthly period, feeling good, sleeping well, managing your weight, that things are doing pretty well. That's good hormone balance, and that's pre. Then there's this big space in between, which is perimenopause. And that can include all kinds of disruptions, Progesterone goes down first, then estrogen starts to decline or go up, and it starts to get erratic. Meanwhile, testosterone and DHEA are declining. A lot of changes going on top of the menstrual cycle changes that are like day-to-day changes. You've got that's the perimenopause phase.
And how long does that phase last? Is it
10 or more years.
10 or more years?
Yes,
Oh,
it can be
sheesh.
that long.
Oh,
Not for everybody, not for
yeah.
everyone. But what's most important for women listening is that if anything seems off, that not to take the doctor's word. Unfortunately, a lot of my patients that come to me because their doctor said, well, you're still having your period, so it can't be your hormones. And that's absolutely wrong. That's not true.
Yeah.
Perimenopause
So it
can
sounds
be
like
anything.
it's almost like this is still kind of an ignored, oh, it's just a woman thing kind of thing
Yeah.
in
Well, we do
medicine, in
have
modern medicine.
We
Is that
do
true?
have that problem in modern medicine. We have it in medical research, right? I was reading something the other day about conditions that affect less than 1% of the population get hundreds of millions of dollars. And then conditions that affect women, which is half of the population, will get under $5 million funding or some huge discrepancy like that. And that, of course, is related to the pharmaceutical industry as we currently have that. So it's a challenge. It's definitely challenging.
And why do you is? I mean, even from a pharmaceutical standpoint, like pure profit seems like it would be higher if you're dealing with half of the population. So
You would think.
why are women so ignored?
Well, first of all, when we talk about anything hormonal and hormone balancing, we want to stick to bioidentical. And bioidentical means that it occurs in nature, which also then means that you cannot take a patent out on something.
So they can't make money on it, so they're
They
not
can,
interested.
yeah, certain ways,
Classic.
certain things. I mean,
Yeah.
if we were focused on health and wellness and preventing illness, that would be an amazing shift. And
Amazing.
I think that women are taking that upon ourselves to bring that shift. We want to prevent illness. We're 80% of healthcare consumers anyway. So we love the men and we want them to be well as well. And and men acknowledge this. A lot of the men that I see in my practice is because of a woman in their life sent them. So
Very
we
true.
really are, women can be the tail that wags the dog at a societal level, and for sure we have to do that at an individual level. You have to advocate for yourself.
For sure.
Yeah.
How do you think having a sense of community helps women during this stage of life? Do you think that makes a big difference? Do you see that with your clients?
I do. I definitely think it makes a difference. I think it's very important. I love the topic of the blue zones, and there's a particular blue zone where women form little groups of four, and they are just there for each other through thick and thin, ups and downs. So I think community is essential. I think that it gets a little bit tricky. In the United States, our culture is very individualistic. It's all about, I can tough this out. I'm going to push through. So a lot of the women, I take care of busy women. A lot of them are professionals, very lots of challenges that they're dealing with as they are growing older and going through these changes. And it's just that it's so important to remember that we need each other, we need community. I think that's happening. I think that's why podcasts are growing, online groups are growing. As long
Online
as it
communities
doesn't
are
become
great.
a place of complaining, that can be a problem with online information. It can be a little bit
Mhm.
limited.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And but I also see the amazing side of that. Like in our program, for instance, we have the most amazingly supportive community. And I think, I've been doing online business for a long time. I've grown lots of different brands and communities and things. And the one thing that I see with this demographic, right, that we're in this 40s and 50s is almost for women. And I don't know if you've experienced this too, right? When you're focused on your family and raising your kids, most of your social network tends to be the parents of your friends' kids, right? You're in sport, you're going to sporting
Yes.
events. And so you're friends with all the sporting, the cheer parents or the whoever.
Yes.
And then all of the sudden your kids get older and they leave the house or they're not doing those activities anymore. And that whole network kind of falls apart. And I see that so often from women sort of hitting this stage of life where all of a sudden your kids are older. So it's not just you're dealing with all the hormonal changes that are happening. You're dealing with
Right.
all of a sudden, I feel like I've lost my sense of self. I don't know who I am because my kids are grown and that was my whole life. And now I don't really have friends because these people I used to talk to all the time about our kids, we don't really have that in common anymore. And so now you're not doing like it can be a very like weirdly isolating, um, discombobulating kind of phase of life, I think, for more reasons than just the hormonal stuff that's going on. Do you see that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that. That's why I am so passionate about getting the hormones balanced because otherwise you could really end up in a dark place
Yeah, for
because of
sure.
all those changes happening around us. I think it's so important. I mean, we have to work our brains, we have to keep up our interests. And so I love encouraging younger women in that area as well. What are your interests? It's always that uh, the one movie, it's a Julia Roberts movie where how does she like her eggs? Where it takes her a lot, she goes through a lot personally. And by the end of it, the she has to face the question, well, what do I like?
Oh, I don't think
So
I've seen
she's,
that movie.
it's great. I'll think of the title. I'll
Is it
message you.
the Eat, Pray, Love? Is that the one?
It's not that one.
Something
I
like it.
want to say Runaway Bride.
Oh,
I want to say that one. I'll double check on that.
we'll
But
put it in the show notes.
that's was my takeaway from that movie
Yeah,
is she
you
spent
got to
so much
you
time,
want.
and this is what we're talking about is we as
Yeah,
women, we spend so much time taking care of everybody else. One of the phrases I like is no airplane captain ever said, make sure you help everyone else before you put your oxygen mask on.
yeah,
Nobody ever said that, and nobody ever will. And I
right.
think that that's the opportunity. That's the silver lining of all of those distractions and busy that we do when the kids are younger or when we have other earlier in our careers, that kind of thing. And then we get to perimenopause and even menopause, and it's like a whole new opportunity to see what it is that we like, what are we interested in,
Yeah.
what do we want to spend the next few decades doing.
And how
Well,
do you want to feel good during that time of your
absolutely.
life? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for saying that because for me it goes without saying. So thank you for highlighting that. And I want to also, I always talk about the modern problem that we have because Ruth, only like 100 years ago, most women didn't reach age 50.
Really?
Yes, like 5% of women made it to age 50.
Oh,
Yeah. Think about before all the modern medicine that we have in hospital care and childbirth and that sort of thing. Oh, yeah. And now at least half of us can expect to live into our 80s or even more. And scientific studies show that people who envision themselves living longer actually live longer.
is that true?
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
But then it comes right back to what do you do right now to take care of yourself? Because I just interviewed somebody for this podcast last week, and she was a geriatric physical therapist. I think that's what
Yeah.
her career was, and
Right.
she became interested in after she went on maternity leave. She became interested in helping women get healthy because she sees the end result, right? She was spending every single day working with people who have zero quality of life, right? They're alive, they've made it to 80, but they're not living.
Right.
And when you see that, and when you see people getting to that phase where it's almost at the point where it's too late, it's too little too late, even you try to help them but there's not a lot you can do, then you go, where do we back up to? And it's right now. It's right
Yep,
at this stage of
that's
life
it.
where now you have this. And I loved the way that you phrased that. You said it's an opportunity. It is an opportunity to decide, what do I want the next 30 years of my life to look like? And how do I want to feel during that time? And like it like kind of gives me chills when I think about it.
I know, me too. Yeah, exactly.
So
That's
okay.
absolutely right.
So let's go back. How do you differentiate between, if you're having these hormonal issues, right? You're in perimenopause, which is 10 years for most people.
Yep.
Um, then there's all this other stuff going on too, right? All these other symptoms that we're experiencing. So how do women differentiate between perimenopause symptoms and other health issues that they're experiencing? And how do you treat them? Do you treat them separately? Do you treat them together? What does that look like?
Okay, I'll answer those kind of in reverse order. Definitely treating everything together because the point is her quality of life. For each of my patients, my purpose is her quality of life. The first step is looking at every single thing that's going on, the circumstances and how they're changing. What is she feeling? Is she having sleep issues, mood issues, sexual function issues, menstrual issues, weight and metabolism issues? Any of those are usually going to at least have a hormonal component.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's that. Then, of course, there's all of the important lifestyle choices. As I say to my patients, I cannot out hormone your lifestyle. I cannot give you a recipe that means that you can, like for me, go back to when I was 20s and younger and I could just go to Baskin Robbins whenever I wanted. As soon as I find that magic pill, I will let everybody know. But right now, what we have are the important choices that we have to make, as well as the hormone balance. Let's see, where else did we want to go with that? Con
So differentiating the symptoms between the
Differentiate.
perimenopause.
Right. So always a hormonal component in my view. That is my bias. That is my angle on things. And so I always look at that. So that's the first thing is the symptoms. The second is I do very detailed lab work.
Mm,
Okay. And my patients usually by the time they get to me, they've tried to advocate for themselves. They've tried to request some testing. A lot of doctors, if she's still having her period, she's in her 40s, or even into her 50s, if she still has her cycle, the doctor won't even run any tests. And if they're willing to, they'll do like two or three
right.
tests, really very few. So for me, the second step is very detailed workup, usually blood work and sometimes urine testing as well. Later on, maybe saliva testing, but I like to start with what people can get done on their insurance. I don't work with insurance because it's too constricting. I spend way too much time with my patients. I did that in the past. I tried to bill insurance and I couldn't make ends meet with my office because I just wasn't cramming in enough
You
people.
weren't fast enough.
I just was taking too
Yeah.
long with each of my patients, and that was for regular gynecology. What
Yeah.
perimenopause, menopause, there's a lot to talk about. So differentiating. So that's the second step. The third is interpreting to optimal, not just are you in the normal range. And I'm saying air quotes because lots of my patients, again, by the time they get to me, they had this or that tested and they were told it was normal because it was in the range, like barely, like squeaked into the bare bottom of the range.
Yeah.
And when I talk with them, like, no, that's in the range, but it's not optimal. So that's the third. And then the fourth is what I do in terms of using natural approaches, bioidentical hormones, supplements, lifestyle choices, everything I can do. And then the fifth is the long-term adjusting, following up. So that's really important is the being aware that there's a hormonal piece to those symptoms. And
Everything.
second is the detailed testing. I would say to
Yeah.
answer the question, that's really the two main, those are my whole five steps, but the first two are really the main, yeah, it's
I
important.
think what stands out to me, just listening to you talk about this and the approach that you're taking, right? Couple things. Number one, the fact that in order to get what you're talking about in our modern crappy system that we have with insurance companies, and the like, get them in, get them out, prescribe the meds as quickly as possible and go to the next one. Like, you have to pay for that privately, basically, is what you're saying. Like, and that's not everyone can do that, right? That's
Right.
so how sad is that? And
Yeah.
what a sad commentary on where we are with medicine, when there is, number one, so many things that you can do from a lifestyle perspective and a natural perspective to be treating what the root causes of all of the issues that
That's
your
right.
experience are, rather than just putting a band-aid on it and taking another prescription.
Yeah.
And yet, so what does somebody do if they're like, I can't afford to spend thousands of dollars to go to a private physician? I have insurance, I need to go through the proper channels. How do you find a doctor that is going to be willing to actually look at the whole picture? Because that's the second thing that stood out to me, is that you're looking at the whole picture, you're doing a full panel, you're looking at all the pieces, whereas most medicine today is piecemeal, 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 piecemeal. And it's so
Yeah.
fragmented that it never really gets to the root of the matter.
Indeed, that's a really important and challenging question. First of all, it is being true to one's own experience. So if I'm going to look for a doctor, I need to honor my experience. I may hear great things about the doctor, but if the staff don't return my calls, they're not taking care of me, then I may need to keep looking. So that's very important. Another is that unfortunately, the generations of doctors are a problem right now. We have a whole generation of doctors trained in the shadow of the Women's Health Initiative study that got hormone replenishment therapy into big, deep trouble. And it turns out that they studied the wrong women, used the wrong hormones, and gave them those wrong hormones the wrong way. So there's things that we've learned, and there are doctors out there who keep up with the literature. The
Mm-hmm.
North American Menopause Society, which now is called Menopause Society, they do quite a good job keeping doctors up to date. They're almost there. But they do a big review of the literature every 5 years. So the most recent one was in 2022, and they made a few things very, very clear. What's nice is that I mean, it's a long paper. It's like 20 pages of very detailed, condensed review of literature, etc. But they do a good job spelling things out. So, for example, in the most recent one, they realized something that I and others like me have known for a long time, which was that the Women's Health Initiative was wrong about a cutoff by when you need to use hormones, otherwise you'll end up in trouble. So they got rid of that cutoff start date. They also acknowledged, again, something that many of us have known for a really long time, that there really isn't a required age to stop. If a woman chooses to replenish some hormones, there's no hard age where she has to stop. That's really important. And then they also did a little more discussing of quality of life, which, for example, vaginal dryness, pain with intercourse, recurrent bladder infections, that's all easily remedied by very low doses of vaginal estrogen, which does not get into the system. So,
Hmm.
fortunately, these kinds of efforts help regular doctors do better for helping their patients. So I am seeing that. I'm
Yeah.
seeing women who graduate from their care with me. What we get everything dialed in, we get them feeling great. And then by that time, maybe I've had the opportunity to at least do email communicating with their doctor or send them the Menopause Society position statement. I don't know if they read it, but at least they are, my
Do a
patient.
little education. I
Yes,
love that.
yes. Yeah, but I am hearing that. So it's very important to make sure that you resonate with your doctor, that they're listening to you, that they're not gaslighting you, telling you that you are just getting older and you just have to live with it. I call that the J word, just. It's like,
Yes, the
don't.
just. No, we absolutely don't. But let's talk a little bit more about the hormone replacement therapy. So when you're talking about HRT,
Yeah.
are there multiple different kinds, right? Is there pharmaceutical and natural versions of this? And because you were talking about bioidentical hormones, is that the same thing? Is that different things? Explain how this works to me.
All right. I love this topic. It's one of my favorite topics. And I always like to admit straight out the gate that I'm definitely biased in favor of hormones. There are so many studies, thousands and thousands of women studied in the US, in Europe, in other places that confirm that the right types of hormones administered the right way can be extremely helpful. Okay, so I like to say my bias right out of the gate.
Okay.
I like to,
Noted.
yeah, I like to use the word bioidentical rather than the word natural. This
Okay.
is where doctors get a little prickly
Okay.
when we talk about natural because there are things that occur in nature that can be very dangerous for our health. So we want to be careful with that. The word natural is used in a marketing setting to imply that it's automatically safe. So it's
Yes.
important to be careful around that. So I love the word bioidentical because what it means is that the hormone that you're replenishing with, that you're putting into your body, is either almost or exactly the same as what our female human bodies used to make plenty of. All right.
Okay.
So our hormone levels start to decline at least in our 30s. For a lot of stuff in our world and toxins and whatnot, some people go through it even younger. But at least by our 30s, even under perfectly healthy conditions, our hormone levels naturally start to decline, especially as well, men as well, but women for sure. And then things further change. And then if we're lucky and we live long enough, our ovaries will go into full retirement and then we're in menopause. And
Yes.
so replenishing some of those hormones, again, not to extreme high levels, but just enough to have a great quality of life. That is my angle, my approach. Bioidentical is particularly important with progesterone.
Oh,
Yeah,
and why is
with
that?
progesterone. The Women's Health Initiative that got the hormones in trouble because it actually issued a press release before the study was published and where we doctors could read it and see what was happening. And so the headlines were instant of an increased trend towards more cases of breast cancer.
Hmm.
However, those women, I remember I said wrong women, wrong hormones, wrong route of administration. So they were given a non-bioidentical progestin.
Mm.
Not, they were not given progesterone. We now know that we have many, many studies, big studies, a huge study in France that was conducted that confirms what I'm talking about, that bioidentical progesterone does not have that increased tendency.
Huh.
Okay.
So how do you get one and not get stuck with the other?
Luckily, it's very easy, and there is at least one bioidentical progesterone that is pharmaceutically available, usually covered on people's insurance. And so that's an easy one. This is a easy one for our listeners to,
Okay.
if they're feeling progesterone calms the brain, helps with anxiety, lots of anxiety
Oh.
in our world today. Progesterone can really help. It calms the brain to help with sleep.
Oh.
So women who are being given a Band-Aid sleeping pill, sometimes progesterone is the root cause, is lower progesterone. As you mentioned, the root cause, that's where we want to operate. And so it's very, very important to have it be bioidentical. And luckily, it's out there and available. Creams are available over the counter. The progesterone oral capsules, for some women, do even better in terms of how they are broken down and how they calm the brain and help with sleep.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
that's
So what do
progesterone.
you typically recommend for your patients? Like what is the most common approach that you take when you say, okay, I think you need to go on bioidentical hormones. Here's what I recommend. What does that look like?
All right. So first of all, it looks like the measuring levels,
Hmm.
which is to get a baseline. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy. Is blood testing the best way? We could argue about that, but it's a baseline. It tells us where we're starting. It also shows if things are very low because then women think, okay, I'm not imagining things. I
Yeah.
actually have no
Always
estrogen
nice
in the
to have
body.
that confirmation.
Right, exactly, exactly. So I always start with sleep. Sleep is critically important for hormone balance. If a woman isn't sleeping, we look at why. Is she waking up with hot flashes or night sweats? So progesterone could be very helpful and is a very easy starting place. Another step can be estrogen. With everything I do, starting very low dose and working up from there is it's that's my method. I think it's a great way for women to not end up with side effects from too much of anything. Estrogen, we have now also learned, is the other second out of the two most important points about hormone replacement or replenishment therapy, as I like to call it, is progesterone being bioidentical and estrogen being through the skin.
Oh.
In the Women's Health Initiative study, they were given oral estrogen, and
Uh,
that goes into the stomach, over to the liver, and the liver then is stimulated to make clotting factors.
huh.
So when you use estrogen through the skin, and this is something that's happened in the last few years, is that women can now get these things online, which I think that's okay. But eventually, sometimes some of the people who end up coming to me and like, okay, I've been doing this by myself for a while. I get ordered my own blood work and I've ordered my own hormones, and I want someone to look over all of this.
Yeah.
So I really would prefer that doctors get with the program and learn and get up to speed on the literature so they can help their patients. So that could be a patch pharmaceutically available. It can be a gel pharmaceutically available. I definitely use compounding pharmacies. They are well regulated, contrary to popular belief. It's different than how the pharmaceutical industry is regulated. So, because doctors are only taught in that paradigm, they tend to dismiss compounded hormone preparations. But for
Interesting.
example, for women to be able to get any testosterone, at least in the United States, requires using a compounding pharmacy. And testosterone can help all kinds of issues, brain sharpness, so it helps clear up brain fog, helps with metabolism, helps with mood. It can be it can help with libido. It's not the only thing that impacts libido for us as women. We're very complex creatures. A lot of things contribute to motivation and sex drive, right? Libido is not
Mhm.
only about sex. So all of that is to say that using the right that is my approach. Using the right safer alternatives, estrogen through the skin and bioidentical progesterone. Those are often going to be a really great start.
Love it. So I feel like I could ask a billion questions about this.
Yes, I mean
This
there's
is
there
the phase
yeah.
of life I'm in. But is there any way? So, is there any way to not do hormones, right? Like, and this is just a question for myself of like, okay,
Sure.
at what point do I need to start thinking about this? I'm eating a healthy lifestyle. I'm advocating a healthy lifestyle. I'm talking about hormonal balance all the time through making the right lifestyle choices and food choices because what you're eating, it has a huge impact on all these hormones. But is there a point that none of that will work and that you have to be on hormones, or do some people do just fine without the hormones?
All right. I'm again saying my bias in favor of hormones.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is that all those good choices are so important for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
there, if we're blessed to live long enough, there comes a point where the ovaries go into full retirement.
yes.
And
Can't
after
stop that,
that,
no matter how good you eat.
yeah, I mean, there's people researching how to stop that, how to, I mean, of course they're looking at it from a fertility standpoint, how to let
Mhm.
women, I mean, I'm 59, how to let women my age have babies, which I'm not against that. However, do I think that we need to not have menopause? I definitely don't think that. I've already said I think it's a huge opportunity, and not having a period anymore is a-okay with me. All right, so
Yeah.
there's big upsides to all of this.
There's an upside.
Yeah, like lots of things smooth out. So, for example, our bones. Our bones. Our bones, the very best thing we can do for our bones after we go into menopause for the long-term preservation of bone density is going to be a low dose of estrogen.
Mm, that's huge.
Yeah, it's really, really critical. My mom had breast cancer when she was in her late 60s. Now she's in her late 80s. And so she's doing awesome. She was basically cured. I know we don't use that word with breast cancer, but that's what happened. And so she got taken off of her hormones, and I've just watched her over the years. She's lost probably like 5 inches in height as her vertebra compress in her
Wow.
spine. And she, just like trips and falls and hits the hand on a table or a counter and breaks something.
Mm,
So this is really one of the most important factors that hormone replenishment can be helpful with.
so it goes back to that quality of life when you're 80s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is reminding me to say something that I always say to patients is super important, is that if a woman wants to use some hormone replenishment, it doesn't mean she's stuck using it forever. A lot of women, especially who are really focused on making great choices and being in great health, are concerned that, well, I'm having such bad hot flashes that I can't sleep through the night. But if I take estrogen to help that, I'll be stuck taking it forever. And that's not true.
Hmm.
So, what I encourage women to do is to kind of put it into these phases. Right
Yeah.
now, I'm in a phase of really feeling terrible. My vaginal dryness is so bad I cannot be intimate with my husband or my partner, like no quality of life. So addressing those issues, I can feel comfortable that I can take care of those issues and I'm not committed forever. I can take it a few years at a time.
I love that. I think that that also like feels very comforting of not having to commit to something for forever. And I also feel
Exactly.
like I could keep talking about this for a very long time,
I
but I want to
know.
be mindful of time.
I
So
know.
tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and how we can find you. Like, how can people find you? You've written several books and you have some other stuff going on. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. I have all sorts of things going on always. My website is always the best way for people to reach me, drlizmd.com, drlizmd.com. People can write to me, ask me questions, sign up for my newsletter that I send from time to time. I would love to give your listeners a free copy, electronic copy of my most recent book, which is Go for
Amazing.
Great, Dr. Liz's
Yay.
Guide to Thrive at Every Age.
Love
And
it.
GREAT is an acronym, gain knowledge, which your listeners do, realize the truth about hormones, which we talked about, explore your expectations, no magic bullets, sorry, spoiler alert, advocate for yourself, and T is for thrive and
Love
really
it.
focus on feeling great at every age. I really consider menopause for me, again, I went in when I was 43, so it was a long time ago. So I've walked the walk of a lot of what I talk about and do with my patients. And so I really consider it to be a huge opportunity. So I'm creating a community called the Miracle of Menopause.
Love that.
And because that's how I look at it. It's really a miraculous time of life. We get to redefine ourselves, maybe define ourselves if we were being defined by others up to now. So I think it's just a wonderful opportunity because when we're doing well, everyone around us does better.
That's so true. So true. Oh, Dr. Liz, it was so amazing to talk to you and everything that you just mentioned and your book that you are giving to everybody, which is so incredibly generous. We will put all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're like, wait, where do I get it? Everything will be in the show notes. So get that and definitely grab the book. Check out the Miracle of Menopause Network if this is an area of your life you're looking for more support. And just thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. You're so welcome.
All right, guys, that about does it for this episode. Remember that you can find the link to Dr. Liz's book in the show notes, along with links to everything else we talked about in this episode. And of course, if you know anyone who might be interested, please be sure to send this their way. And then be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of future episodes. And I will see you back here for another new episode very soon.